Welcome to today's Mishna Berurah class as we continue in the laws of the priestly blessing. We are discussing the laws today of the Siyas Kapayim in the various parts of the service. So we're looking at which services get the Siyas Kapayim service. Okay, so lots of services going on. This one is only 2 seifim long, but there's a lot going on, so we may only get through these 2 seifim today. We shall see how it progresses. I'll see how my face progresses, meaning how fast I can get the words out in an understandable fashion. But for the sake of our viewers, we try to speak a little slower because this isn't the northeastern United States where we try to get a 45-minute conversation squeezed into half an hour. Try to be as lucid and clear as possible. Let us begin with our understanding of the laws of the Siyas Kapayim. So the Siyas Kapayim is in Shachris and Musaf and Ne'ilah. Okay? That's the only time you get it. Okay? But Yom Sheyesh Bo Ne'ilah, right? So there has to be Ne'ilah that day. When do we get Ne'ilah? Yom Kippur. The question is, that's not the only time we can get it, but we'll look at that in a minute when the Mishnah Berurah goes into more detail about what is Ne'ilah. But those are the services that get in the Siyas Kapayim: Shachis, Musaf, and Ne'ilah. But not for Mincha. Why? Because it's common to be drunk at that time. Because maybe the Kohen is drunk, and therefore the rabbis made an enactment at Mincha to not even do it on that day either, because of a regular Mincha every other day of the week. But on a fast day, when there is not Ne'ilah, and the Mincha is close to the end of the day, that is similar to Ne'ilah. Okay? I know, common to be drunk. What can I tell you? People used to drink more. The truth is that that's not really so crazy. Someone asked me, he says, why are they traveling? Why are they all these sorts of people traveling with lots of jugs of wine? Why are these old stories? And they were traveling and they broke their buckets of wine. I said, because the same reason why they travel with beer. The processes of these drinks made sure that the drink was safe, as opposed to drinking water, which was often not safe. And so therefore they felt that even though they got drunk, it was still safer than drinking water that was putrid, because they would often get sick. So those are the reasons why they used to drink so much. Not because they enjoyed the intoxication, but because they enjoyed having no additional sickness side effects of their beverages. So that's why it was so common. But later in the day, where it's similar to Ne'ilah, that is not going to be confused with the Mincha of every other day. And so therefore, one on a fast day could do Siyas Kapayim. Okay, and the Ramah says, and we already said what our custom is before in Siman Kuf Chav Ches, where we said that the minhag was only to do it on Yom Tovim. Now, well, let's look at the Shulchan Aruch's custom, because this custom now, even though this is the custom of the Sfaradim and so on, these customs also find themselves to be common in the land of Israel nowadays, even amongst the Ashkenazim. Okay, so let's talk about the 3 services that get the Siyas Kapayim: Shachris, Musaf, and Ne'ilah. Okay, so Mishnah Berurah explains we're talking about a regular weekday. So the morning service gets an Siyas Kapayim, and on a day that has Musaf, like Shabbos, that gets one. Okay, so that's why every single day there's Shachris, that gets an Siyas Kapayim. And on Shabbos and Yom Tov, when they get a Musaf, that gets an additional Siyas Kapayim. Okay, and on Yom Kippur, when you have Ne'ilah, and it's still daytime, that also gets a Siyas Kapayim. So the idea is to say that those are all the different times when you could get this. Okay, so now the Mishnah Berurah wants to clarify which days get Ne'ilah. So those are the fast days that are explained later on in Siman Tuf Kuf Ayin Tes, which is 579. The rabbis made an enactment that there is an additional Ne'ilah service like Yom Kippur. These are special fast days. We're not going to go into that. But if you want to look it up in chapter 579, you can look up those extra days that also have a Ne'ilah, like Yom Kippur. Okay, so we don't do it in the afternoon because of the drunkenness. Why? Because he's going to get drunk in the middle of his meal. And a drunk person is prohibited from doing Nesias Kapayim. Now, we mentioned this earlier in the previous Siman, 128, in halacha number 38. That's prohibited, which is not the case of Musaf. People don't stop to have a meal in the middle of Musaf. Also, the measurement considered drunk before prayer was very strict, more than what we would expect now, even during driving. And, hold on. I don't know why. It always sorry. It always cuts me off in the middle of your sentences. Our standards for making us drunk for mincha or no? So okay, so let's finish this halach over here, and this will help clarify it for you. So the problem is you're having a meal, and in a large meal you're going to drink a lot more. Okay, but musaf, at most people will just have a little bit to eat. Okay, and that was common, as we see later on in Siman Reish Pei Vav, halacha Gimel, which is 286, number 3. So that people are not going to have a big drink. So the big drink was, as we learned earlier, it has to be more than a revius. And the problem wasn't being drunk, is that you had enough that it could impair your ability, but it wasn't so much. It wasn't as strict as the actual service. So we learned that previously. Okay. Now, to clarify what the Shulchan Aruch says, that you could do Nesias Kapayim on a fast day, our long Shabbat services could make us drunk for mincha. Yes, there's that. So the Shulchan Aruch mentions that on fast days that have Ne'ilah on them, and you're davening later, even for mincha, that's later. So that would be fine, because then you're not worried about the drunkenness. So the Mishnah clarifies that it's a tiny sibur, public fast days, because those days, as we say, they'll have a special extra fast prayer service of Ne'ilah or Yom Kippur. Okay, so those are the days that have the extra one. We rule out afternoon services because of mincha during the week, during a regular weekday. So what's the difference? Because on a regular day of when there's mincha, on a regular day when there's mincha, it's like right after lunch. But on a tiny sibur day, we recite mincha while there's a much longer period of time left of the day, because we want to leave time to add Ne'ilah into it. And Ne'ilah needs to be said before sunset. And so therefore, that's why mincha is exchangeable in our minds with a regular mincha. And that's why we don't let you say Nesias Kapayim at a regular mincha. Because people are going to still want to continue to eat. But that's not the case here. When you have Ne'ilah. Now, the other problem is that if you have a much longer day, you could have had a much longer meal, because you can't have a big meal on any regular day until you've davened mincha, which we discussed later on in Siman 232, talking about things that are restricted to do before mincha. So Ne'ilah, which is so uncommon and only restricted to a fast day, we're not going to worry about you switching it off with a regular mincha. Okay, and so therefore we don't add Nesias Kapayim on days there's not mincha, like the other four fasts and fast of Esther. Okay, and then there's also the fact that it gets a little bit late for Ne'ilah, because it comes like right before sunset. And this explains because the common custom the Shulchan Aruch is referencing is it was their custom to to restrict its recitation until right before sunset. Now, Mishna explains our minhag, the Ramah says, is different, which is to say that in the Ashkenazi custom, there's no Nesias Kapayim all year long except for holidays. And that is restricted to Musaf. And nonetheless, all these other rules that we mentioned apply. Okay? So if we want to say Elokeinu v'Elokei Avosenu, if we want to make the mention of that, we used to do Nesias Kapayim at this time period, then you add that in there. We learned that already in Siman 127. So go back about a month in the timeline, and we talked about this. Because if you could do Nesias Kapayim, we say Elokeinu v'Elokei Avosenu, which is why on fast days we say it, even though we would not do it. Okay? Okay, so that is the first halacha here. Let's take a look at the second one. Okay, second one. Now, a kohen that breaks the rules, and he ascends the duchan on Yom Kippur at mincha time. Even though, since we know that Noah's going to be drunk at that time period, this is acceptable to have him do Nesias Kapayim. And you don't remove him because we want people to think that he's not a kohen. Because you don't want people to say, "Oh, you're now good as a kohen," and that's why they took you down. And the Ramah adds, therefore, at the mincha of Yom Kippur, we say Elokeinu v'Elokei Avosenu, even though it's not the appropriate time to say Nesias Kapayim. Nonetheless, were you to go up and you could do it, that's considered enough of an okay. And that's what we do in our country, even though there are people who disagree. So let's go through this. Okay, so Shulchan Aruch explains, we know that no one's getting drunk, okay? Which is to say, the Mishnah explains, that this isn't part of the original enactment that the rabbis made of prohibiting you from reciting the Nesias Kapayim, okay? Because you're going to mix it up with other days. That's just not happening at this time. Okay, and we already mentioned that. And therefore, we don't take him down if he went ahead and went up. But on mincha of a regular day, you do take him down. Why? Because the rabbi said you can't do Nesias Kapayim at that time. Okay, and we say that over here, he's considered ever so slightly able to do it. Nonetheless, people who only fast half the day and daven on Erev Rosh Hashanah, and those type of fasts, they don't say Elokeinu v'Elokei Avosenu, even according to this opinion. It's only for a full fast. Okay, so a couple of other interesting halachos over here. I think we're going to just do these two for today. We'll move on in the laws for next time. Let me see over here. Yeah. I want to bring up some other interesting stuff over here. So I just want to point out some interesting other halachos that are interesting over here as well. I feel that they're interesting. Okay. Okay. So some other interesting laws over here. The Kaf HaChaim points out that so we're going back to the rules on Tainus Sibur, you do Nesias Kapayim. So if you look later on in 566, if 8, every public fast day has Nesias Kapayim in the afternoon, except for Yom Kippur, and that's from the Gemara. Okay, so the Shulchan Aruch's rule is the reason why we say Elokeinu v'Elokei Avosenu at every single mincha. We don't do it on Yom Kippur. Okay, so the Gemara says that, and the reason why is because the Ne'ilah prayer is said later in the day, almost right before sunset, and so therefore it doesn't look like regular mincha during the rest of the year, when we might mix it up with drinking at the meal and then saying Nesias Kapayim. Now he says that there are people who follow the custom of the Ari, that they don't do it. He says that by mincha on a tainis is different because the Gemara says this is the rule, and so therefore we have to follow what the Chachmei and the Gemara rule, even though there are maybe Kabbalistic reasons not to do this. We follow the halacha that's stated explicitly in the Shulchan Aruch. Now this is interesting because we're Ashkenazim, that means that's why we would add Elokeinu v'Elokei Avosenu for mincha on public fast days. Okay, and so that's why it's just an interesting extra halacha to look at for here as well. So that's one other thing. But even though there's no Eilos on those days, we still say Elokeinu v'Elokei Avosenu, and the Kaf Chaim also extends that to explain that when you have a what's it called? That if it's on a day where there is no ne'ilah, if there's a kohen there who is not fasting, he shouldn't go up to the duchan with the other kohanim who are fasting. Okay, and that comes from he quotes himself the Pri Chadash. Okay, and so if they make it to mincha, he therefore should not go up with them. And even though we're worried about people saying that he's not kosher, nonetheless, he says that it's not appropriate to do. Okay, and so that's important. So those are on public fast days. All right, and we said that that's also because it's also later in the day. So the question is, what time are we talking about starting? And so the Kaf Chaim answered that question. He said you start at around the 11th hour and 1/3 of the day. Okay, so so he says it's it's much later in the day. It's like it's basically like 45 minutes before sunset. Okay. So that's what he's saying is when it would be an appropriate time to go ahead and recite mincha. And on those days, you could add according to those who do the Siyas Kapayim, that's when you would add it. So just some interesting halachot to add there at the end. We will hold our class here today, and we will pick up next time to wrap up. We will wrap up the last law of the Siyas Kapayim. So the next time, well, let's see over here real quick. How many Mishnah Berurahs are here? It's really long, I think. Yeah, it's really long Mishnah Berurahs. I want to give it its own class. So we'll pick up with the end of the Siyas Kapayim in our next class with Kuf Lamed. I think maybe I'll add one more class that I won't broadcast live just to finish that off so we can pick up next time with it. No, we'll do it one more live. We'll do one more live. And we'll finish up the Siyas Kapayim and move into the wonderful world of Tachanun after that. Thank you for joining, and hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their week. Take care.